how the U.S. laws are regarding the import of marine animals, wild captures, and how that's different from the import laws here in Canada. If you could correct me and share with us, and how it can be complex and very difficult to lobby a country to stop capturing, but what do we do to stop the import?
Very good question, and I'm not necessarily the best person to answer it because I am not intimately familiar with the law here in Canada, though I have a passing familiarity. Mike probably knows more, but in answer to your question how it works in the U.S., the Marine Mammal Protection Act, which you do not have here in Canada, you do not have a similar law. There are a few countries that have a law that's specific to marine mammals. And the reason we have it is because Congress recognized back in 1972 that marine mammals do have some special needs because we don't know as much about them as we know about terrestrial animals. They live 80 to 90% of their lives below the surface of the sea. We're not very good at, penetrating that barrier. And so we end up not knowing as much about them as we need to manage them properly. And so the Marine Mammal Protection Act built in a precautionary approach, which was really progressive for 1972. And basically said these animals, given their lifestyle, need an additional level of protection because we're operating in ignorance a lot of the time. It is not illegal to capture marine mammals in the United States for public display. It's just a permitted activity that is publicly transparent. And therefore, the last time it was tried, which was in 1993, when 3 Pacific white-side dolphins were caught off the coast of California, was such a disaster PR-wise for the aquarium that did it, the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, that nobody has tried it since. And that was a public effort. That was public protest and public opposition that made it so distasteful for the public display industry to do that nobody's tried it since. It doesn't mean they can't. They could file a permit application tomorrow. But I would assume the public would rise up and protest. The import of the 18 belugas from Russia into the United States was the first time in 20 years that anybody had tried that. The last attempt to import animals from outside the U.S. for public display that had been caught in the wild on purpose for that was in 1993 from Japan. And again, the protest was so loud that nobody tried it for 20 years, but when they did try it, last year, the public rose up. They received more comments. Sam came to the, to the DC hearing that our agency held, and, I don't remember how many people came, but it was a fair boatload. And then there were 9,000 public comments submitted, which was about 4 or 5 times more than they normally get for the next most controversial permit application. And they denied it. Our agency denied the permit. I wasn't even expecting that. And, I don't think of myself as a cynic, I think of myself as a realist. But I really didn't think that they were going to do the right thing. I just become very disillusioned with our process in the U.S.
It's working.
But they did the right thing, and it wasn't entirely because of public protest. They don't have to factor in public controversy with their decision by law. It was because we provided them with the science that they did need to make that decision. We made sure all the right information got in front of them, and that's effort. We've got to do our homework, we've got to do our research, and we've got to make sure it gets in front of them. In Canada, it's different, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike because I don't really know. You definitely have an import problem because obviously John Holler brings these animals in all the time.
Yeah, we do. We have the wild capture import loophole. It's not legal to capture these animals in Canadian waters. It's not legal to go to Churchill, Manitoba and get beluga whales from Hudson's Bay, or you can't go to the coast of BC. You can't pull out an orca out of the ocean there and capture it and bring it to Marineland or SeaWorld or anywhere else. But we do have wild capture that takes place anywhere else. So that's where John Holler gets his animals, as he goes to Russia. And he gets his dolphins from the Black Sea, and he gets his belugas from the Arctic Sea up in Russia as well. So that's what is a major problem. We need to get that closed. And it's funny that you mentioned, it's funny that you asked this question at the kind of the perfect timing, because I'm not an expert on federal laws, not yet anyway. But I do have someone here that might be able to answer your question, actually, just a little bit more thoroughly. Our local member of parliament here in St. Catharines, Rick Dykstra, has joined us, and Rick's no stranger to my grilling over the wild capture loophole. Give him a hand as he comes down here. So hopefully we'll give us a little bit more information on the wild capture loophole and what we can do to get it closed. Thanks for coming, Rick.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks everyone for being here this evening. I hope folks aren't leaving just because I'm coming in front of the auditorium. And I take your comments with respect to putting a marine mammal back out into the wild and out into the ocean isn't something you just do overnight. It's something that's going to take a long time to get them educated, to get them feeling comfortable and back into their natural environment. It's a little bit like the way things work in Ottawa. We can't practice overnight success. It's not something that happens at the provincial level. It's not something that happens at the federal level. I've been at this for 8 years. I wish I could come up to the front of this auditorium. In fact, a little deja vu, I think I had my first debate when I ran for federal office here on the stage at Sir Winston. So I was kind of thinking, I hope this wasn't the Rocky Horror Picture Show and you guys took tomatoes and toast with you tonight, but I figured I would do my best to try to give you a kind of the feel for where we're at, and Mike did a pretty good job of describing what Canada's law actually is right now, and that is that it's illegal to capture anywhere within Canadian waters, but we're not, as a country, we do not have legislation that disallows someone from capturing a marine mammal in a country that allows for it to happen in their waters. So it is a problem, whether you want to call it a loophole or whether you want to call it an absence of legislation. I do think that there is the opportunity, and the research that I've done, there is the opportunity to move not just legislation, but actually do this through regulatory reform. And that's a little bit different than having to move legislation. We can actually do it through regulation, which a government can do internally, versus having to pass legislation through the House of Commons. But I have to tell you, the whole issue around just animal rights in general, there isn't, and you'll see in most platforms, whether it's provincial or federal, a lot of room in platforms from any party that speak to the issue of animal rights. And I think your comments with respect to moving people isn't going to Ottawa or storming my office and anticipating that change is going to happen that way. It may be an effective way to get some attention. I don't doubt that for a minute. I've done it once or twice myself. And it does allow for that momentary piece of attention paid toward it. But when we actually do it in a way that educates the people that I work with in Ottawa, and this isn't a partisan issue, to be quite honest with you. There is no, from our side of the House and the Conservative side, whether it's Liberal, NDP, the Bloc for that matter, this is an issue that does have individuals that have been elected to the House of Commons across this country who want to pay attention to it. The difficulty is it isn't at the level that it should be in order for us to turn heads and change minds. And I guess what I'm asking you tonight, and the reason I'm really happy to be here, is that if there's a way that we can do it in a stepped fashion, where people who are elected become aware and understand that this is an issue that's relevant and important to people, then I think that we can take the steps forward necessary. And in any battle, the biggest pieces of the battle are done at the end to win the war. The pieces that are the most difficult are the first few steps that we start out with. And look, you've got my ear. I know that from the moment that I got elected federally, that and getting an understanding of some of our legislation with respect to animal rights, that's over 100 years old. Some of the legislation is actually fascinating to read because it was written when cars and planes didn't exist. And I think things have changed just a little bit in this country and in the world. So I don't know if there's any comments or questions you guys want to make, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to advocate, and I'm here to tell you that if you want to work together and you want to attempt to move minds and hearts in Ottawa, there are some people that are elected at the federal level that are prepared to listen and prepared to act and do so in a manner that doesn't suggest or submit that it has to be in a partisan way.
I'm going to need a list of names of those candidates.
Thanks, Rick.